Before the hotel's front doors opened again, the general manager was already on his way down from the 14th floor, and nobody in the lobby knew why. That part came later. First came the Tuesday morning in late October, when Adrian Carter drove 6 hours from Sudbury to Toronto, with his son asleep in the passenger seat and a reservation confirmation printed on paper because his phone battery had died somewhere past Barrie, and he hadn't wanted to stop. The paper was folded in thirds and tucked into the breast pocket of his jacket. The jacket was clean but old, waxed canvas field coat he'd owned for 11 years, worn at the elbows, darkened at the cuffs from weather and work. He hadn't thought about it when he packed. He almost never thought about clothes. His son's name was Owen Carter. He was 9 years old and had fallen asleep somewhere around Newmarket with his forehead against the cold window and his hands folded in his lap like a much older person. Adrian had turned the heat up 2 degrees and said nothing. The boy slept the way his mother had slept, completely, without restlessness, as though sleep were a place he trusted entirely. The hotel was called the Pallister. It was on Wellington Street, 12 stories of limestone and polished brass, the kind of building that made a point of its own seriousness. Adrian had booked it because the conference was there. He was presenting Thursday morning, a paper on structural load modeling for Northern Climate Foundations, and the organizing committee had arranged a block rate for attendees. He had called to confirm the reservation 3 weeks ago. The woman on the phone had been pleasant and efficient. She had confirmed his name, his dates, his room type. Standard double, 2 nights. He had written down her name. It was Priya. He pulled into the parkade at 8:47 in the morning. Owen woke when the engine stopped, looked around without alarm, and said, "Are we here?" "We're here," Adrian said. They walked in through the side entrance, which connected to the lobby through a corridor that smelled of cedar and something floral. Owen carried his own bag without being asked. He had started doing that a few months ago, sometime in the spring, as though he had made a private decision about it and saw no reason to announce it. The lobby was wide and quiet. The floors were dark marble. There was a fireplace on the far wall that was lit despite the morning hour, and the chairs arranged near it were the kind that looked expensive even when empty. 2 men in suits were talking near the elevator bank. A woman with a rolling suitcase was checking her phone at the concierge desk. Everything moved at the measured pace of a place that had decided long ago that calm was a form of status. Adrian walked to the front desk. There were 2 clerks, one who was already helping someone and one who looked up when Adrian approached. His name tag said Brendan. "Good morning," Adrian said, checking in. "Carter, Adrian Carter." Brendan typed, looked at the screen, typed again. "Can I see some ID and a credit card?" Adrian put both on the desk. Brendan looked at the driver's license, looked at the screen, typed something else. "I'm showing a reservation for a standard double," Brendan said. 2 nights, checking out Thursday. "That's right. I do want to let you know that check-in isn't until 3 o'clock. I know. I was hoping you might have something available early or at least somewhere to leave our bags. We have some time before we need to be anywhere." Brendan looked at the screen again. He seemed to be considering something, but not the availability question. His eyes moved from the screen to Adrian's coat briefly and then back. "Let me see what's available," he said. "1 moment." He went through a door behind the desk. He was gone for 3 minutes. Owen had sat down on his bag near the window and was watching the street outside. A streetcar went past. He tracked it until it disappeared. When Brendan came back, there was a man with him. The man was perhaps 45, with the kind of posture that came from a long time spent standing in lobbies and deciding things. His name tag said Philip Ostrander, Guest Experience Director. "Mr. Carter," Philip said, and extended his hand. "Good morning. I'm Philip Ostrander. I handle guest experience here at the Pallister." Adrian shook his hand. "Good morning. So I understand you're hoping to check in a bit early today, if something's available. If not, we can store the bags and come back at 3. Philip smiled, not warmly, exactly, but carefully. "The thing is, we're working through a fairly full turnover this morning. Most of our rooms are in housekeeping right now. What I can do is put your bags in storage, and we'll send a text when your room is ready. That's fine. The other thing I wanted to mention." Philip paused. He glanced at Adrian's jacket again, and at Owen, who had stood up and come to stand beside his father. "The Pallister has a dress standard for our common areas. The dining room, the lounge, the library, business casual at minimum. It's something we mention to all guests on arrival." He said it in the tone of someone who believed they were being diplomatic. Adrian looked at him. "All right, it's just something to be aware of. I understand." Philip nodded. "Wonderful. Brendan will get your bags sorted. Enjoy your morning." He walked back through the door. The door closed quietly behind him. Brendan had the bags tagged and stored within 5 minutes. He gave Adrian 2 claim tickets. He did not quite meet Adrian's eyes when he handed them over. Outside, Owen fell into steps beside his father on the sidewalk. They walked half a block before he said, "What was that about the dress thing?" "Hotel policy," Adrian said. Owen considered this. "Was that why he kept looking at your coat?" Adrian said nothing for a moment. "Probably. Your coat is fine. I know. It's cleaner than his tie." "That's enough," Adrian said, but his tone was not sharp. It was the tone he used when something was true and he didn't want to encourage it anyway. They went to a diner 3 blocks east on King Street. The sign above the door said Vera's in faded red letters, and the booths inside were upholstered in cracked vinyl that had been there since at least the 80s. They sat by the window. A woman named Pat, her name was embroidered on her apron, brought them coffee and chocolate milk without being asked. She refilled the coffee once, asked Owen if he wanted more milk, and when he said no thank you, she said that was the right answer because she'd given him the last of it, and she'd have been lying if she said there was more. Owen smiled at that. It was the kind of smile Adrian didn't see enough of lately. They ate eggs and toast. Owen had a side of baked beans that he regarded with suspicion and then finished completely. By the time they walked back to the hotel, it was just past 11. Adrian had a preparatory meeting for presenting authors at noon in one of the conference rooms. He retrieved his leather bag from storage, leaving Owen's backpack, and told Owen to wait in the lobby. "There's a seating area near the fireplace," he said. "You can read." Owen had brought a book. He was reading a novel about a boy who builds a shortwave radio during a blackout and starts receiving transmissions from a frequency that shouldn't exist. He pulled it from the front pocket of his backpack and went to the chair by the fire without complaint. Adrian watched him for a moment. This boy who had gone through the last 18 months without falling apart, who asked practical questions instead of impossible ones, who folded his hands in his lap when he slept, and then went to find the conference room. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. When Adrian came back to the lobby, Owen was still in the chair by the fire, still reading. He hadn't moved. He'd taken off his sneakers and pulled his feet up under him, which was the kind of thing Adrian would normally say something about and today decided not to. He sat in the adjacent chair. "How is it?" "Just transmissions are from his own future," Owen said without looking up. "That's unsettling." "It's very unsettling," Owen agreed, still reading. They stayed that way for a while. The lobby moved around them, a family checking in, a porter crossing with luggage, 2 women in conference lanyards laughing about something near the elevator. The fire made a low, steady sound. At 1:15, a woman came into the lobby and stopped when she saw them. Her name was Claudette Fairfax. She had the look of a person who had, at some point in life, become accustomed to having her preferences treated as reasonable requests. She was wearing a camel-colored coat and carrying 2 shopping bags from Holt Renfrew, and she had the forward energy of someone who moved through lobbies as though they were personally maintained for her benefit. She went to the front desk. Brendan was there. "Excuse me," Claudette said. "I want to ask about those 2 by the fire." Brendan looked up. "The man and the child," she said. "Are they guests? I'm not able to share information about, because he is certainly not dressed appropriately for this lobby. And the child has his shoes off." She said this last part with the specificity of someone reporting an actual hazard. "This is supposed to be a luxury property." Brendan said something Adrian couldn't hear. Claudette said something else. She did not lower her voice as much as she believed she was lowering it. Philip Ostrander appeared again from somewhere. The man had the quality of materializing rather than arriving. He spoke briefly with Claudette, then looked across the lobby toward the fireplace. He walked over. "Mr. Carter," he said. His voice was still pleasant. Pleasantness, Adrian was learning, was one of his tools. "Good afternoon," Adrian said. "I want to apologize for interrupting." A pause designed to suggest that he did in fact regret it. "We've had a concern raised about." He looked at Owen's feet, tucked under him on the chair. "We do ask that guests maintain a certain standard in the common areas, shoes on in the seating areas." Owen looked up from his book. He looked at Philip. He looked at his feet. He put his feet on the floor and put his shoes back on, and he did it with a composure that was, in Adrian's assessment, considerably more dignified than the situation called for. "Thank you," Philip said. To Owen. Not to Adrian. "That's all right," Owen said. Philip left. Owen went back to his book. Adrian said nothing. But something had settled in him. Not anger exactly. It was something quieter than anger and more durable. He had learned, in the kind of work he did, that there were structures that held and structures that looked like they held. The difference usually revealed itself under pressure. He had been making that assessment since they walked through the door. At 2:15, the text came that their room was ready. Adrian went to the front desk. Brendan processed the check-in. He handed over 2 key cards without making eye contact. As Adrian turned to go get Owen, Philip Ostrander appeared for the 3rd time. "Mr. Carter, I wanted to catch you before you headed upstairs." Adrian stopped, turned. "I've been reviewing the morning situation," Philip said. He had the manner now of someone who had rehearsed this, "and I do want to say that we stand by our standards here. The Pallister has a certain reputation to maintain, and that means we have to apply policies consistently." He said this as if consistency were a form of courtesy. "I want to make sure you're comfortable here, but I also want to be transparent. If our standards aren't something you're able to accommodate, we do have a cancellation policy that would." "I'm presenting at the Canadian Structural Engineering Conference Thursday morning," Adrian said. "My reservation is confirmed for 2 nights. I have the confirmation number and a record of the call I made 3 weeks ago to verify it, including the name of the agent I spoke with. My son and I are guests of this hotel. We will be here for 2 nights. If there's a specific policy we've failed to meet, I'd appreciate it in writing." Philip looked at him. "The coat," Adrian continued, "is waxed cotton and is in good condition. My son's shoes are on. I'm not certain what standard we've failed to meet, but I'm happy to review it if you can produce the documentation." A beat. "That won't be necessary," Philip said. "Good," Adrian said. He went and got Owen from the chair by the fire, and they went upstairs. The room was on the 9th floor and faced north. Owen stood at the window for a long time looking at the city. He could see a sliver of the lake between 2 buildings if he looked at the right angle, and he made Adrian come look at it. "You can just barely see it," Owen said. "I see it. That's Lake Ontario. I know. We should go see it properly." "After I read through my notes," Adrian said, "they went to the lake in the late afternoon, walked down to the waterfront, where the wind was hard off the water and Owen's ears went red within 5 minutes. He didn't complain. He stood at the railing and looked at the gray water going flat to the horizon and said it was bigger than he'd imagined." Adrian said that was usually how it worked. They ate dinner at a sushi place on Front Street that had been recommended by one of the other conference presenters. Owen tried Yellowtail for the first time. He was quiet for a moment after the first piece, and then he ordered another. They were back at the hotel by 8. Owen read until 9:30, and when Adrian told him to sleep, he did in the immediate, trustworthy way he always did. Adrian sat at the desk by the window with his notes spread in front of him, and the city lit up and distant below. The notes were good. The paper was solid. He had spent 4 months on it, and he knew where it was strong, and where he had been too conservative, and where the committee might push back. He went through it line by line the way he always did before a presentation, making small marks in pencil. He didn't think about Philip Ostrander. He was fairly good at not thinking about things that didn't require immediate attention. He finished his notes at 11:15, showered, and was asleep by midnight. Wednesday passed in the way that conference days pass. Long, dense, oddly compressed, with too much coffee and not enough chairs and conversations in doorways that ran 10 minutes over. Owen spent the morning in a children's drop-in at the Metro Toronto Reference Library 2 blocks away, which he had requested specifically because he'd looked it up before they left Sudbury. He spent the afternoon in the hotel lobby reading, and when Adrian came back at 5 o'clock, Owen had finished the shortwave radio book and was satisfied with the ending, which he described as logically sad. "Logically sad," Adrian repeated. "The right ending, but still sad." They had dinner in the hotel dining room because Adrian wanted to go over his notes one more time before the morning and didn't want to lose the time to transit. The dining room required the jacket he had brought for the presentation, a blazer, gray, that he hadn't worn in 6 months and that still fit the way it had when he bought it. Claudette Fairfax was at a table across the room. She noticed him when he sat down. He noticed that she noticed. Neither of them acknowledged it. Owen ordered the salmon. He said it was fine. Adrian ordered the duck, and it was better than fine. The maitre came by once to ask if everything was satisfactory. His name was shown on a small pin, Roland Marsh. He was professional and brief and did not look at the coat which Adrian had left in the room. At some point during dessert, Owen was working through a piece of chocolate cake with the focus of someone diffusing something. A man came into the dining room and was seated near the window. He was perhaps 60, heavy-set, with the careful movements of someone who had recently stopped moving quickly and was still adjusting. He looked around the dining room once when he sat down, The way people do when they're trying to get their bearings, and his eyes passed over Adrian and Owen and moved on. His name was Harold Sutton. Adrian didn't know that yet. Thursday morning, 6:45. Adrian was dressed and ready an hour before he needed to be, because he was always dressed and ready an hour before he needed to be. Owen was still asleep. Adrian had left a note on the desk, a $20 bill beside it, and instructions for the morning. Room service number, location of the conference hall, what time to come down. He went downstairs. The lobby was quiet. The night staff was finishing their shift. He got coffee from a cart near the conference check-in and stood with it and looked at the room filling gradually with engineers and academics, and the particular type of person who chooses to spend their career thinking carefully about what holds things up. He was reviewing his first slide on his phone when he felt someone standing near him. He looked up. "Adrian Carter," Harold said. Adrian looked at him for a moment. "Yes, I thought so." Harold put out his hand. "Harold Sutton, I was at your talk in Calgary in 2019, the permafrost thermal modeling work. I've been citing that paper for 4 years. "I know your name," Adrian said. "The lateral force paper in the Canadian Geotechnical Journal." Harold smiled with the genuine pleasure of a man who had long since stopped expecting to be recognized. "That one. Yes. What are you presenting today?" "Foundation load models in freeze-thaw cycling for residential builds in the shield zone." "Lord," Harold said almost to himself. "I need to be in that room." They talked for 20 minutes, the kind of conversation that skips most of the ordinary steps, because there aren't enough of those either, the engineering specific, the shared knowledge of problems that don't resolve neatly. Harold had a coffee too now. He asked about the Sudbury work. Adrian told him, whose photo had been visible on Adrian's phone when he unlocked it, and Adrian told him briefly, 9 years old, his son here for the conference. "Good age," Harold said. "My grandson's 8, different every month." At 7:40, Harold said he needed to check his email before the morning sessions. They shook hands. Harold said he'd be in the Thursday morning track. "The front row," he said. "I'll be the one taking notes." The session went well. The room was fuller than Adrian had expected. 40, maybe 45 people. He had given presentations where he could feel the room engage and ones where he couldn't, and this was the former, which he was grateful for, but had learned not to rely on. He answered questions for 15 minutes after the formal close, and could have kept going if the next presenter hadn't been setting up behind him. Harold Sutton, first row, had taken notes on actual paper. Owen came down at 9:30, slightly too pleased with himself about having ordered room service, and found his father in the conference registration area with a cup of coffee going cold in his hands, and a cluster of people he was listening to more than talking to. Owen waited. He had learned to wait. When the cluster dispersed, Adrian said, "How was breakfast?" "I ordered the eggs Benedict," Owen said. "I wasn't sure what that was, but it sounded like a commitment." "Was it?" "It was a lot of sauce." They checked out at 11. Brendan was at the desk again. He processed the checkout with the same careful efficiency as the check-in. When he slid the folio across the counter, he said, in a voice that was lower than his regular register, "I hope you had a good stay, sir. The presentation this morning, I heard it went well." Adrian looked at him. "Word travels," Brendan said. "Thank you," Adrian said. He meant it simply, and he thought Brendan understood that. They were at the elevator with their bags when Philip Ostrander came out of a side corridor. He saw them. He stopped. For a moment, nobody moved. Philip walked toward them. He had the bearing of a man approaching something unavoidable that he had been avoiding. "Mr. Carter, Mr. Ostrander." Philip glanced at Owen, then back. "I understand your presentation this morning went quite well." "It did." A pause. "I also understand that Harold Sutton was in attendance." "Harold is." He seemed to recalibrate whatever he'd been about to say. "He's a significant figure in the engineering community. He sits on the Pallister's advisory board. His firm helped advise the structural renovation we completed in 2021. He cleared his throat. "He came to me this morning, after your session. He indicated that he felt that the way you were received on Tuesday was..." Philip stopped, started again. "He made it clear that your reputation in your field is considerable, and that how guests are received here reflects on the hotel in ways that go beyond our standard protocols." "Did he?" "I owe you an apology," Philip said. He said it the way people say things they have decided to say, rather than things they want to say, but he said it. "The way I spoke to you on Tuesday, the suggestion about the reservation, that was not appropriate, and it was not consistent with how we ought to treat any guest. I'm sorry." Owen was watching this without expression, the book tucked under his arm. Adrian looked at Philip Ostrander for a long moment. "I appreciate that," he said. "I hope you'll consider staying with us again when you're next in Toronto." "I'll consider it," Adrian said. He said it in the way that meant something and wasn't unkind. The elevator arrived. They got in. The doors closed. Owen looked at the floor numbers ascending and said, "What was Harold?" "Someone I met this morning. An engineer." "Did he say something to the manager?" "He did." Owen was quiet for a moment. "Then, would you have said something yourself if he hadn't?" Adrian thought about that. "I did say something. Tuesday. I mean more than that." The elevator reached parkade level. The doors opened. "I would have written a letter to the hotel group's regional director," Adrian said as they walked toward the car. "I had her name from the conference organizing committee. I was going to send it Friday." Owen walked. Considered. "You weren't going to let it go," he said. "No, you just weren't going to make a scene." "There's a difference," Adrian said. Owen thought about this, like the structural thing. The difference between a load bearing quietly and one that fails. Adrian looked at him. "You talk about that when you think I'm not listening," Owen said. They reached the car. Adrian unlocked it. Owen put his bag in the back, got in, and immediately tilted his head against the window at the same angle as Monday morning, which made Adrian think he would probably be asleep by the 400. He was. Before Vaughan. The drive back to Sudbury was 6 hours in November light, which was flat and gray and particular to the Shield in a way Adrian had never quite been able to describe to people who hadn't seen it. He drove without music for the first hour. Owen slept. The highway ran north through country that got more itself the further you went. Rock and scrub and boreal coming down close to the pavement, the sky big and uncomplicated overhead. He thought about Owen's question, about the difference between a thing that holds quietly and a thing that breaks, about what you pass on when you're the only one doing the passing. He didn't arrive at any conclusion that felt finished. Most of the real ones didn't. By the time Owen woke up, they were past Huntsville, and the boy looked out the window at the darkening trees and said, "When's the next one?" "The next conference, February. Winnipeg, can I come?" Adrian looked at the road. "It'll be cold. It's always colder than here. I know what Winnipeg is," Owen said, with the patience of a boy who has been managing adult underestimations for some time. "We'll see," Adrian said, which, between the two of them, had long since stopped meaning no.